Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. Thank you guys so much for joining us here today for our first part of our How Law Firms Will Win in 2022 webinar series. So today is part one. It's marketing and advertising. Thank you guys so much for being here. Feel free to ask questions or comments in the chat. My name is Erin. That's me. I work at Market My Market. I'm the operations manager. I'll be moderating today, so I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. If there are any questions, concerns, comments you guys have. We have a great agenda today. So we're going to start with Chase Williams going through using your CRM, followed by Cisco Adler at Digital Rain going over PPC for lawyers. Ryan from Market My Market is going to go through conversion rate optimization. Stephen Gallo from Reputation Inc. is going to go over media relations for lawyers. And then James Morehouse back at Market My Market is going to go over digital marketing channels. So we're excited about all the presenters we have today. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to the attendees who are here today. And again, if you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat. We're going to have these guys go through their presentations today, and then we'll have time for some discussion at the end. So thanks for spending your afternoon or your lunch break with us today. We really appreciate it. Chase, we're going to have you kick off here. So Chase is one of the managing partners. I'm going to mute myself and let me know to advance the slides as we go.
Thanks so much, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to be as brief as possible, and we'll have a Q&A at the end, I believe, right, Ryan? Erin, Ryan?
Correct, great. Yes.
So make sure, if you do any questions in the meantime, feel free to put them in the chat. If you can't make it throughout the entire webinar, and we'll make sure to answer them for you. So today I'm really going to be talking about the importance of using your CRM. Hopefully at this point, there's some sort of technology in place. It's not just a sheet of paper that has all your cases and inbound leads. So really, what is a CRM? Hopefully everybody has something like a HubSpot or a Clio. The things we're going to be talking about today really are using it correctly. So who's in charge of that CRM? Is it an office manager? Is it someone at the firm? And then what are you really trying to get out of the CRM? Is it just to say you have a CRM? Is it to stay organized? Is it to keep in touch with people? So the first aspect of it is, are you really using it correctly? So really, what are you tracking? Are you tracking someone's, as intake comes in? Why are you tracking this? What are you going to do with that data afterwards? Are you following up? How many times are you following up? And then what exactly are you doing with that data? So I'll review all those points. Next slide, Erin. Thanks. So first off, some of the most common CRMs in the legal industry would be HubSpot, Practice Panther, LeadDocket, Clio, Zoho, Salesforce. Those are probably the top players. There might be some that are a little bit more niche for your specific practice area. So the questions that you really should be asking is, are you logging your intake forms? Is every single form of communication that's happening with a potential client or lead being logged into your CRM? If not, it should be. And there's a myriad of reasons why we should be doing this. One is figuring out, is someone you hiring actually doing their job? So once a phone call comes through, is the front desk person taking notes? Are you following up correctly? Are you sending them follow-ups via mail, via email? If they've opted in on a lead form to receive text via text? Are you logging every single inbound or outbound call? So most people are logging their inbound calls, but what about the outbound calls? So there's a lot of third-party pieces of technology and systems that will enrich your data. So there's things like CallRail, which will automatically, anything that's coming in through your numbers, that data can all be automated directly to go into your CRM. And then notes obviously would have to be taken, and you can even attach the actual calls into your CRM so you can go back and review those calls. Something like Dialpad, that's more like an outbound system. So if you wanted to track the outbound calls that your team is making, that can also be directly correlated back into your CRM. So there's some things that are valuable when doing this. Would be like, hey, how long is somebody actually on the phone during that first call? How long does it take for someone to get a return call back? There's also software such as Clearbit, which will enrich the data for you. So let you know a little bit more about your consumer. So whether it's you just have a phone number, maybe you can figure out some more information about them that might help help you reach back out to them or help enrich your CRM. So there's a lot of different third-party software that you should be implementing if you're not already to make your CRM a little more powerful, and that way you can utilize some of the main points, which will be in the next slide. So this is just an example of like a piece of software that we use here at Market My Market. So we use a third party that integrates with our CRM, which is HubSpot, called Lead Forensics. So, and this really works for B2B. So any like PI or criminal defense out there, or B2C clients can't really benefit from something like Lead Forensics. This is an example of something that integrates with our CRM. So we do IP tracking. So as long as somebody's cookies aren't enabled, we can see every single day who came to our website, from which firm, and how they found us and what they're reading. So it gives us an idea of a customer's journey of how they actually found us. So we have someone that signs up as a client at our firm. We want to know exactly, how did this client come to be? Did they click on a pay-per-click ad? Did they read a blog? Were they part of our email drip campaign? Was it, do we meet them at a conference? The main reason is we want to understand how we could double down on our marketing and what types of marketing we should cut out. So if we realize, hey, we're spending tens of thousands of dollars on pay-per-click and none of these are turning into clients, all this information is tracked in our CRM. We're able to realize and say, hey, you know what, instead of CRM, instead of paid, let's invest in more conferences, because we're signing all of our clients from conferences. So we're able to make more educated decisions based on that data and based on the fact that we're tracking everything. So here's some of the things, speaking of tracking, that we should be tracking. So anytime somebody clicks on a click to call button, your visits, your conversions, your time on site. So what exactly is happening when someone who previously reached out shows high intent? So there's opportunities to say, all right, this is a perfect use case would be, a lead came in 2 weeks ago, you tried to call them, they didn't pick up, you tried again a couple of days later, they didn't pick up. Now all of a sudden your CRM tells you, hey, they're back on your website. That's like a red flag to say, okay, this person has interest again, there's high intent. What can we do? So if we've enriched our data, maybe we can send them a text message if they've opted a text. We can call them again. We can send them a physical piece of mail. So there's different ways to stay top of mind for these people. Next slide. Thanks. So this is like the most important thing. At the end of the day, why are you using the CRM? Is it just a way to stay organized? And for most people, it is. There's so many more things you can do with the data that lives in your CRM. So I mentioned before, having that full circle, clear picture of a signed case. So how do we get this case? Next is having an idea of if you're wasting your marketing dollars, if there's opportunity to spend more money on things like pay-per-click, which Cisco will go into in a couple of minutes. And I'm sure he has much more insight than I do about wasted marketing dollars, and everybody's very excited to learn about that, I'm sure. Opportunity to spend marketing dollars more effectively. So that's something like instead of having ads on Google, maybe possibly investing in SEO or different types of Facebook advertising. The opportunity that I spoke to before about following up appropriately at the right time when we notice that someone, we're tracking that specific user to see if they're back at our website, what they're looking at, what types of blogs they're reading. And this is really important too, to stay top of mind with a client for repeat business, is using your CRM to send out holiday cards, to send out birthday reminders, just creating that relationship with the customer. And this can all be automated. So if we have a specific note in our CRM for everybody's birthday, you can integrate with third parties. Like this is just another use case example, a third party software like Lob, where automatically every time it's someone's birthday, you could send them a postcard that says wishing you a happy birthday from XYZ firm. And that's something you set it up one time and it's just one and done, and it's very simple and it's very cost effective. And that's about me. That's it for me. That's my 10 minutes right there. Like I said earlier, we'll have some time for some Q&A afterwards. So I'm passing it back over to you, Erin. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Chase. Really appreciate that. Next up, we have Cisco Adler from Digital Rain, and he is going to dive into that PPC world here. So there we have him relaxing out in beautiful, sunny, tropical location. And I'm going to kick it over to you. Let me know when to advance the slides.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And Chase, that was good information. Yeah, guys, you have more data than you've ever had available to you. And so, use that data and make sure that all the channels that you're working with are optimized as much as possible. So if we can go to the first slide. So I want to talk a little bit, and I have a jillion slides, so we're going to go through them really fast. But I want to talk a little bit about why PPC is growing and why it's gaining more traction. Now, LSAs and the Google screened ads that appear above PPC have taken a little bit of the wind out of PPC sales, but we still find that it's a very important area to advertise, and it goes back to you got to basically do everything, because you have to have a little bit of PPC, a little bit of LSAs. If you have the budget for it, and you can do billboards or traditional print, as far as radio, things like that, everything works together. SEO, it all works together. So there is no single one channel that wins out over all the others. So PPC is now, Google is increasing the size of the ads and shows more ads than it ever did before. So we have bigger ad formats. Let's go to the next slide. I want to keep going really quick here. And we have more ads before organic listings. So as important as SEO is and the map pack and all that, again, going back to doing everything and trying to make the most out of each area or each channel, we want to make sure that we're optimizing our Google PPC ads, because there are more of them available before the first organic listing. And now recently Google's rolled out, not recently rolled out, but they're actually mandating that we start using responsive ads, which allows us to test different headlines, different body copy, multiple variations of each ad, and use machine learning to determine which one gets the highest click-through rate and conversion rates. So that's another new kind of rollout that Google has done recently. And then we have ad extensions, which allow us to make larger ads, again, pushing down a lot of the other organic listings on the page. So we want to make sure that we're making full use of those. So if you have an agency doing your Google ads, you want to make sure that they're using all the ad extensions available to them. And Google does reward you with higher quality scores for doing so. So PPC is now more important than ever. It's become more competitive with a lot of firms are now jumping back into advertising that had pulled back. So you're going to find some higher cost per clicks in some cases, but it's still very important that you're still doing it, especially branded terms. If you don't have a budget to do a lot of the areas of practice that you do, at least bid on your own name and make sure that you're showing up above all the other listings for your own name. And again, it's getting more competitive and more expensive. So it is something that you have to have somebody really minding the store on a daily basis. Negative keywords are something that a lot of you probably do know about. Basically, if you're a PI practitioner, you don't want to show up for family law searches or criminal searches, et cetera. So you want to make sure that you're regularly checking for the search terms, which show what people are actually typing in, and making sure that you're putting in those negatives, that you don't want to appear for. So negative keywords act as a filter to be sure that if you, like you said, if you are a PI lawyer, you don't show up for divorce lawyer terms. And then there's this one, Google has a lot of best practices, but not all of them are a direct relation to our area of practice, just because our keywords are so expensive. Legal keywords are some of the most expensive out there, with maritime accident lawyer, for example, in Texas, can be easily $800 per click or even higher. Now that's an extreme, but still, our keywords are some of the most expensive out there. So you really need to take into account the fact that we don't have a lot of data compared to, say, an e-commerce that's selling widgets that sells thousands a day. So we have to know kind of what our own best practices are for the industry. So I highly recommend that you work with an agency that has done PPC for law firms in the past, just because it is kind of a different animal. And then, there are going to be certainly searches and cases that you're not going to want to accept or take, but yet somebody else might. So if you have good, strong referral networks, you can work to monetize all those leads and at least get a referral fee, because PPC, unfortunately, you can't prevent somebody who, was at fault from clicking your ad and costing you money and calling, but you may be able to make a referral that would work for you and give you a referral fee. So if you can monetize every lead possible, in the long run, you're going to do a lot better with PPC. And then this is really important both for whether you're doing organic or paid search. Pretty much everything that has to do with the user experience is to be sure that your landing pages, your website pages load extremely fast. There are statistics out there, that for every second that it takes for a page to load, you lose a certain percentage. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you definitely lose a percentage of people. So the faster your pages are, the better the user experience, and more likely that you're going to convert that prospect or that visitor into a lead. And then this one's important too, and this goes back to conversion rate optimization, which I know Ryan's going to talk about. A very critical component of paid search, organic, or anything else that you're directing traffic to a landing page or a website is that the page matches very clearly to the ad that got the click in the first place. So you want to make sure that you're carrying through the same conversation. And if you match your ads and landing pages, you're much more likely to convert, which is much more likely to create a lead out of a click. So make sure they're matching. And then along with that is, always be testing and optimizing. So when we work with a client, and this is something that, again, Ryan's going to be talking about in conversion rate optimization, is testing, tracking, creating new iterations of landing pages and website pages, and making sure that you're doing everything possible to turn those clicks into leads. And that means testing graphics, headlines, copy, calls to action, etc. But you just never want to, set it and forget it and assume that your page is converting. You want to be testing and tracking that. This is one that, there's been a lot of talk about this in the industry, but generally, bidding on competitor terms is not a great idea. It works for some firms, some of the larger ones out there that have a really strong brand, but generally, when you bid on competitor terms, you're going to get a lot of people that are existing clients of that competitor. And so you're going to be paying for clicks that are very costly, and they're going to call and ask to speak to an attorney in that practice. And when you tell them, or when your intake tells them there's nobody there by that name, they're just going to hang up or say, I'm sorry, I must have the wrong number. So, it really doesn't behoove you to bid on competitor terms unless you have a really large budget and you have a very strong brand that you can actually flip that competitor call into a case for yourself. So, kind of looking at what's next in the paid search world. Next slide, please. So we have, personal assistants like Siri and Alexa and those types of things. So we want to be sure that we're thinking ahead and optimizing for those types of searches. And that's something that's still, early, but it is coming. So we want to be sure that we're always thinking ahead and doing research into the latest. And when you're working with an agency, you want to be sure that they're thinking ahead too. Next slide, please.
Do we have a momentary technical difficulty?
It appears that may be the case. Sorry about that. Are you guys seeing the slides?
I see personal assistant up there. Just now I see you.
Now you see me. All right, I'm going to try and kick it back to the slides here. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
In the meantime, Cisco, what were like the next things that we have to anticipate in the world of pay-per-click?
So we have the slides up now. Sorry about that.
Got it. I'm sorry, what did you say, Ryan?
Oh, we're good now. So we're back on track. I was about
I'm
to
so sorry
start
about
the Q&A early, but we're good.
I'm sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, so, wearables, and no, you're doing great. You actually are timing everything just right. So thank you.
Perfect.
Voice search, visual search, there's going to be a lot of things coming down, the pike in the future that we're going to need to optimize what we're doing for. And it's going to affect, a lot of large brands first, but certainly, again, just going back to staying on the forefront of things, making sure that, your agency that you're working with is always looking at the future and making sure that, that they're working towards what is coming next. Yeah, so voice search. We can move to the next one real quick. I know I'm running out of time. And any questions you guys have, like I said, I kind of ran through everything really quickly and I hope it wasn't too fast, but I just wanted to get through all those points. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Great. Thanks, Cisco. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. And I know that we said we were going to save most of the questions for the end, but Cisco and Joe have a hard stop here shortly. So now would be the time to ask them any questions that you have about PPC. And you can put those questions in the chat. If you have any, or I believe you may be able to unmute yourself. But in the meantime, Ryan, it sounded like you had a question.
We'll have Kevin be able to ask this one, and then I certainly do have a couple that'll segue very nicely into the next segment.
Excellent. So Kevin asked here in the chat, do you need to do anything special on your website to have it be found by voice search? Which is a good question.
Not at this point. In the future, there may be certain protocols that you want to follow, but at the moment, no, there's nothing specific other than you just want to make sure that you're obviously ranking in the top, whether it be organic or paid.
Excellent. And then Sarah Bush asked, do you recommend a course to take for PPC certification? Always wanting to learn more.
Well, Google has its own certification. And then also there is on Udemy or Udemy, I don't know how you pronounce it, UDEMY. There are some really good PPC courses that you can take that they don't give you certification there per se, but they give you a lot of the information you need when you do go to take that Google certification course.
I don't currently see any questions in the chat. So Ryan, if you want to ask what's next.
Sure. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide when before I ask the next question, because I think this will be a great segue, as I had mentioned, because conversion rate optimization is just absolutely crucial for paid. As we know, it can be very expensive depending on the keyword, but we also know that the keyword, the intent is there. I mean, we're talking about short tail keywords that people typically will only really search if they are in need of that particular legal service. So Cisco, unfortunately, not off the hook just yet. I have one important question for you, if you don't mind answering for me. I don't know, did he leave already?
Nope, I'm still here.
Okay, good. So your landing page is extremely important, and you made an excellent point about the ad lining up with the landing page, like as seamlessly as possible. So, like in your experience, what other steps or maybe like incremental changes have you made to landing pages to increase the conversion rates? Um, is there anything that's really like moved the needle more than other things in your experience?
Yeah, there's a few things. Number one is obviously the most important thing I could probably tell you guys is optimize for mobile primarily. That's going to be the majority of your clicks and leads. So you really want to make sure that your landing page is not just mobile friendly, but super mobile friendly to the point where it's primarily focused on mobile. You want to focus on calls more than form submissions, generally because people on a phone, it's easier for them to click the call than it is to click and fill out a form. And on the plus side of that, then you're not chasing them down to try and get them on the phone. So, think about mobile friendly, mobile optimized, click to call on the, very prominently. And actually, we always put a button at the top of the page and then we have it scrolling so it stays fixed. So I'd say those two things are probably the keys.
Great. Yeah, appreciate that answer. And the reason I asked that is not just because I have two slides. I want to really make the most of those two particular slides. But there's a really not the biggest emphasis on CRO when it comes to organic. And I don't really know previously from having done SEO for the past decade why these conversations don't happen as much, and they seem very exclusive to paid just because of conversion, and the numbers are very clear cut. I'm paying X per click. I want to be able to convert X percentage so I can ensure that I'm getting the return on investment. But it turns out all those kinds of applications and that concept should really be applying a lot of times to SEO and organic traffic too. So that's what I plan on discussing today briefly, and talking about what steps we can take for CRO, and how CRO for the concepts that we talk about with pay-per-click really do carry over to SEO a lot. And we talk a lot about user experience, a lot of that mobile optimization and site speed and making sure that things like render well on different dimensions and devices. But CRO is oftentimes a couple other steps, I feel, when it comes to organic. So we can go to the next slide and get started there.
Before we do that, Ryan, you sound a little differently than you did earlier. I don't know if your mic is plugged in differently. We got something in the chat saying they can't hear you very well. If there's an adjustment you can make there. And in the meantime, thank you, Cisco and Joe, for joining us today. We really appreciate that. That was great information, and we will make sure that you get our recording and you can hear the rest of our lovely questions that happen at the end of our call here. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us.
Sorry, is this better?
I'm only hearing you in one ear, and someone else mentioned that they can't hear you well. Magda, do you hear him better now?
That's odd. It's a typical, it's my podcasting mic.
She says no, but that's okay. So, I mean, I can hear you, but I just wanted to see if there's adjustment we can make there. But I will go to the next slide.
Just speak a little louder, Ryan. People love to hear you anyway.
I apologize in advance if I sound really bad right now. Not sure. Okay, it's good. All right.
We got some. It's good. All right, go forth.
Sure. So, conversion rate optimization is the concept, and I know that Cisco touched on it with pay-per-click, and it's definitely one of the major driving forces of a successful pay-per-click campaign. But it's also really more of an up-and-coming focus with SEO, especially for people that really generate thousands of visitors to their websites that are oftentimes going to really important high intent pages. So here's an example of a screenshot of analytics, and over time, if you've done any sort of reporting or looking at analytics, you'll see that a lot of times the focus is sessions or new sessions, new users, overall breaking down the kind of traffic you get to the website from an organic standpoint. Always extremely important to be able to break that down by individual pages. So not really helpful if you just have a whole snapshot of the whole website. You get 100,000 visitors to your website a month. It's not that helpful. Maybe if you can see a gradual trend, that's helpful. But we're always looking at individual pages because you want to see what's going on there, and that affects the types of cases you're getting or the different geographies people are coming from. As far as user experience, that's when you start to get into bounce rate and page sessions and average session duration. So if people are going to your home page and then they're bouncing off, that's typically an issue because people aren't always going to get all the information they need from your website just from the home page. That's why they're going to your blogs or your articles, your individual practice area pages, or reading attorney bios. So depending on the page, it's important to look at those things. But CRO takes really the next step, and it's about setting up goal completions and then the conversion rate, which you can see all the way to the right, and the percentage. So the conversion rate optimization, or the conversion rate in this instance, would be the amount of visitors that go to the particular page and the amount of those people that went on to fill out a contact form. In some instances, we can take that to the next level, and it can be if they engage or initiate a chat. It can be if they pick up the phone and call. There are other things that can be pulled in, like Chase had mentioned in his previous presentation. Your CRM can pull in that data too. If you can kind of tie all the information all together, you can have like a really good idea of what's going on with individual landing pages on your website. So this is kind of all the information that would be needed to be able to keep track of CRO on your website. So in the next page, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about what steps and what kind of mindset you really want to have to improve CRO on a website. So you'll see some things here that do align with user experience. So as I mentioned, and also Cisco mentioned, if the mobile experience is bad, it's not going to convert. A lot of people have their web traffic at this point is 60, 70, 80% traffic comes from mobile. That's why there is an emphasis there. It's not just for pay-per-click. It's oftentimes definitely happening on your organic pages. So if anyone's heard about page speed insights, that's good from an SEO standpoint. But things like that definitely contribute to user experience. Great user experience engages people, keeps them on the website longer to make the next step to contact the law firm. And other best practices that would typically go beyond some of the technical or web development related things is actually kind of like your messaging and kind of the impact that you have on a visitor to your website once they get there. And some things that I can give as an example there are call to actions. So it's always been very common for people to write blogs or pages and then have your anecdote or your kind of, I don't know if you, for lack of a better phrase, generic opener for the content, kind of get into the weeds with, depending on the practice area. If it's personal injury, you're talking about, what you do after a car accident, why a lawyer can help, why you shouldn't talk to insurance. If you're talking about criminal defense, you're talking about, am I going to go to jail? Am I going to lose my license? What kind of jail time am I looking at? What kind of, other consequences are there? And it kind of has a flow that we're all kind of used to. But the thing is that the call to action, the free consultation, the free case review, the free, whatever it is that your firm likes to provide to your potential client is always at the bottom with the call and then all the experience and all that. But if someone's on mobile and they're landing on that, and we've looked at like heat maps and kind of, scroll kind of analytics to see how far along people actually go on those parts of the website. And people oftentimes don't make it to the bottom of that page, especially on mobile. So it's considering like what kind of information or what kind of call to action do I actually provide towards the top, as opposed to expecting people to scroll through and actually read the whole thing, because we know people really aren't doing that nowadays. So the click to call is fantastic, especially what Cisco said, kind of having the feature that's sticky at the bottom of your mobile device, so that it can always be the option to call all along. Form submissions, they could happen on mobile, but it's not as often as desktop. Chat features, sometimes they're really bulky and it's difficult to actually engage in chat on a mobile device, depending on who the vendor is. So it's just thinking about the call to action and the kind of impactful information you want to have above the fold, especially in mobile, especially when people's attention spans are the most abysmal they've been probably in the past few decades. So that kind of goes into the next part, video and other media. Do people want to read text, or do they want to watch a video that has an overview of what you're discussing on the page? Does an infographic work? Does that get the point across? Imagery is a whole other thing that we're exploring right now. Do people want to see the same stock imagery that they're going to be seeing on the next 5 law firm websites? Personal injury, Do they want to see the same generic car accident or ambulance? Criminal defense, do they want to see the same generic, police car or handcuffs? It's like thinking about what other media and what kind of imagery or content that you want to provide to someone for them to resonate the most with your law firm, and kind of break that mold that's been going on a lot in the legal industry for a long time. And yeah, I already mentioned click to calls and other easy CTAs. So depending on the experience, not everyone wants to get inundated with ways of contacting you immediately. For pay-per-click, you're spending a lot of money on keywords, and it's understandable that we're working to convert. But if it's organic, some people are looking for information. They want to be educated. They want to learn more about your law firm before they contact you. So maybe it's more important to work on navigation or providing more information before you're trying to convert them. Even though I know I'm talking about conversion rate optimization, you do want to create an experience where they feel comfortable before contacting you. So these are some considerations. I know that we're working a lot on it and considering this a lot, because people always talk about generating more and more traffic to their website, and then they talk about qualified traffic, but then if you can't convert your qualified traffic, it's all for nothing. So that's my spiel.
Those are your two slides. All right, next up we have Stephen Gallo from Reputation Inc. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here. So I've got a bit to cover today, so I'm just going to kind of get through it. Just a little bit about me. I used to teach at the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications. Was an on-air TV and radio reporter before joining Reputation Inc. Back in 2016. And speaking of which, if you want to advance just a little bit about us, as an agency, we're a public relations and content marketing agency for B2B companies, professional service firms, especially focusing on law firms. And we're a virtual team of 9 and counting. Virtual before COVID made it popular, by the way. But anyway, all right. So what we're going to talk about today briefly, just really 3 high-level things. Why law firms should care about media relations, some strategies and best practices, and interview do's and don'ts for when you do land those media interviews for your experts, your attorneys. So looking at some research first, why media relations in the first place? So BTI Consulting did this interesting study. It was a 5-month-long research where they spoke with 270 top legal execs at large corporations, essentially asking them to rank different business development initiatives based on their effectiveness and the factor of how likely of a factor it is to play into hiring outside counsel. And you'll notice, I mean, at the top, unsurprisingly, personal knowledge activities such as a referral, a peer referral, or an intro through someone else. But you'll see right behind that is these credentialing activities, things like being quoted in the media, authoring an article that is in a trade publication. And the point here to keep in mind is that it's not, nothing's ever going to replace great service and those personal relationships, but these credentialing activities are very much supportive and augmenting those efforts. So if we can advance, and I'll show you as well here that same study also showed that those credentialing activities actually compounded. I don't know, Aaron, if we're on that next page or not with the graph, you can see that, with the research that they've shown is that there's actually a cumulative effect the more that an attorney might appear in the media. In fact, if an attorney is quoted 3 times based off those metrics, you can achieve nearly the same trust factor value as they would from a single peer referral. So it very much is a snowball effect. And that's one piece of it. The next piece is really share of voice rule, which share of voice, essentially, I know I'm not a math guy, so you've seen an equation. I wouldn't be the first to put an equation in here, but essentially what it is just the percentage of conversations about a topic that your firm is a part of. And so essentially, brands that have a higher share of voice than their share of market are going to see growth, and by punching above your weight. So this is especially true for B2B lawyers and law firms, but also applies for more consumer-facing ones. But you can see on the next slide as well that research by LinkedIn, they've actually took a look at this and saw that excess share of voice actually converts at a faster rate to additional market share, particularly for B2B professional services compared to other sectors. And you can kind of see that comparison here with just a few. And Lastly, so why media relations? Just my final, I guess, point here is really mental availability is a part of this, right? Human beings, we have a tendency to use mental shortcuts or heuristics when we're given a choice between, a few options that are similar. People tend to go with the one that comes to mind most easily or the one they're most familiar with. And of course, while selecting a law firm and vetting different options for legal counsel is a little different than, say, picking a box of cereal off the grocery store shelf, at the end of the day, those prospective clients, those buyers are still relying on shortcuts because at the end of the day, they're still human beings. And a Nobel Prize winner, I believe his name is Daniel Kahneman. Anyway, he has a great way of putting this, and I like it. It's, human beings are to independent thinking as cats are to swimming. We can do it, but we prefer not to if we don't have to. And so a lot of times, even just that recognition can go a really long way supporting kind of what your expertise is. Okay, so I'm done trying to convince you, I guess, about why media relations. Let's maybe look at some strategies on the next slide as to how to go about taking advantage of it. So for starters, expert analysis on timely topics. It's kind of self-explanatory, but I mean, an example could be right now, what do vaccine mandates mean for healthcare employers? If you have perhaps an employment lawyer, a healthcare lawyer who can discuss these topics and what the implications are going to mean for their clients, that's someplace where they can be an opportunity where they can be sharing that. Similarly, the concept of newsjacking, it's kind of, pegging a story pitch idea that's tied to a timely news story, a timely event. Perhaps it's the infrastructure bill the president recently signed, and that can serve as a springboard to discuss a related topic within that context. Because we know that there might be media or journalists already kind of having this conversation. And so it's taking that as an opportunity to say, okay, how can our lawyers be a part of that conversation? Source filing is really a fancy way of saying, putting together a bit about who your expert is, who your lawyers that you're trying to get placed in the media, a bit about their background. What can they talk about? What's their experience? And sending that out to reporters, even to say, hey, I see you've covered these topics in the past. I have this attorney who really could contribute to this in the future. And so even if it's not something immediately now, it's a way to kind of make those introductions, build relationships, and have for your folks to be on the radar of that journalist going forward. Byline articles, again, pretty self-explanatory, but a little more of an opportunity versus getting quoted in the media. Particularly legal trade publications are going to be a major place where you can get a byline article placed versus perhaps an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. It's going to be a little more challenging, but that's a great place to have more of a long form sharing of insight from your lawyers. Press releases on major cases and deals. I mean, be surprised sometimes how many things lawyers think are not a big deal because they're in that case and that matter in and out every day. But when there's something worth announcing and you can announce it, you should, and that's an opportunity to do that, to talk about any successes you have, because that's worth talking about for folks who are wanting to learn more about your folks. A profile on an individual or firm sounds great. Hard to pull off sometimes, but there are unique situations where that might make sense, where it might be worth a whole profile on your firm or a particular person. Just one quick example. There's a law firm that was like in the deep South that hired their first or elected their first female managing partner. And that was kind of a unique angle to talk about what that meant in the larger context of women in law. And so that was a great way to kind of get a profile for that individual. But again, those might be fewer and far between. And then finally, calendar hooks, just things that you can tie and use an excuse as another springboard. October was, there's like an estate planning awareness week. So for an estate planning law firm, that might be an opportunity to say, hey, this conversation's happening this week. We can talk about perhaps what, the Secure Act is going to affect changes to distributions and how they're taxed. That's just another excuse to, to get out there and be talking on those subjects. And finally, rankings. Anyone who's played in the legal industry at all understands, there are a dime a dozen, some that have a greater return on investment than others. And that's usually what I advise focusing on, those worthwhile ones. But again, just another opportunity to really get your firm's name or your attorneys out there and recognized. So to look at just a little bit about the process of like the day-to-day, what does this look like? Essentially, a big part of this is that first piece, conducting regular, consistent input calls with your attorneys. And that's just honestly, it sounds pretty straightforward, but it's a way to stay on top of their matters, any upcoming case milestones, trends they're following, just kind of pick their brain and see what's going on so that you can use that as fodder to pitch them or to prepare upcoming announcements, press releases for a case, let's say. Of course, another place to look for ideas, scanning Google alerts, industry newsletters, subscribing to those and keeping a pulse on what others are talking about. Same goes, you can see here in blue, the follow industry associations, trade pubs, industry influencers on LinkedIn, to see, have your ears open to those conversations so you can see where the best opportunities are to have your lawyers inserted in them. Integrating with content teams, you likely know this as well, that one feeds the other. But again, I've seen it as well in some firms where the content's being created, whether it's a blog, a podcast, what have you, and that's siloed off and not really, there's not communication happening there between any public relations efforts or media efforts. And so I always say it's important that those teams are talking because they can feed and play off one another. We talked about source guides and background briefings a bit already. Pitching editorial calendars is big. Publications, they plan out already in advance what they're going to be covering month to month. So if let's say you have a corporate investigations attorney and you know that particular publication is doing a issue on white collar litigation, in November, that could be an opportunity to say, well, if I'm going to pitch them on that, maybe that's the month I should really be focusing on because we know they're going to be covering this already. And lastly, calendar hooks, developing pitches throughout the year. Essentially, it's a rolling process. It's always an ongoing process. And so that's part of it too. But these are just kind of a few high level, little day-to-day ways to practically kind of go about doing that and doing some of the knowledge extraction, if you will, from your lawyer. So you can find opportunities to say, well, where can we position you in the media? So when you do land that media interview for your expert, for your lawyer, a few best practices, right? I mean, number one, for sure, checking with clients for any permissions or conflicts. The last thing you want is a client who didn't want publicity on something coming to you to say, hey, I saw this somewhere publicly. What happened? Not good. So I always advise that that's step one. And really preparing and having some key messages written down. This is not, I don't say this to say you should have a verbatim script that you're going to read for an interview. Interview should be conversational, should be natural. But I always say, prepare 3 to 4 bullet points, some key messages that you definitely know you want to get across and that you can always come back to and reference. Of course, if you're working with a PR professional or an agency, they might be able to give you some background on that particular reporter or media outlet, the angle they're looking at, or even potentially some questions that they may ask so you can kind of prep and walk through how to respond to those. And unlike me today, probably, as I'm conscious of time, speaking slowly and deliberately is also super important, which seems obvious, but you'd be surprised when there's a camera or a microphone in someone's face, things just have a tendency to change. And then of course, avoiding self-promotion. I mean, there's a time and a place for advertising, but speaking with a reporter, you're not there to be an advertisement. You're there to provide value, to provide insight. And so those are just a few things to keep in mind. Now you'll see the last one is using bridging techniques. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about what that is. You may be familiar with the concept, maybe just not with it called that way. You probably, you know it when you see it, but it's essentially, say there's a question that your lawyer or you can't answer or perhaps don't want to answer. Usually you hear no comment. I say no comment is typically the worst comment because you don't want to be a dead end of a conversation. You don't want to just end it. And at the same time, you don't want to be feeding misinformation or speaking about things you can't speak about either. So bridging is kind of just this practice of finding ways to bridge and pivot to one of those messages that perhaps you've highlighted before that you want to get across out of a question that perhaps you can't answer. And so you can see a few examples here. Something you get one of those questions, and it's easy enough to say, okay, well, I can't comment on pending litigation, but here's what I can talk about, or Well, that would be speculating. I don't want to speculate, but here's what we do know. And so obviously, it's not a silver bullet, and it's something that can be more natural with more practice. But it's just something to keep in mind when you get those sorts of questions. That's just one little tip in the back pocket for you to have. And lastly, I wanted to put on here just a few common media mistakes that I've seen lawyers make. And that they tend to be common. Speaking in legalese, you maybe could have seen that one coming. Jargon is not going to be super helpful for your audience unless they're, a very specific, specialized audience. My general advice is talk to the reporter as if you were explaining something to your grandmother, because at the end of the day, you're thinking about that end reader, right? We talked about no comment. Failing to understand a news angle is a problem too, right? Maybe understanding that we're doing a story about a particular topic, but a lawyer thinks, okay, maybe we're going to go down this avenue, when the reporter was thinking, well, I was framing the story to kind of examine it from this perspective. And so sometimes you could totally miss on that if you're not understanding kind of what the goal of this piece is that you're working with a reporter on. Obviously, misleading a reporter, omitting facts. You don't want to do that. And part of that sometimes is, forgetting that everything is on the record. That's a problem. There's background interviews, off the record interviews, but just because you're not being quoted or recorded per se, doesn't mean that your comments are just going into a black hole. You never know. So I always just treat every mic as if it could be on, every camera as if it could be rolling, every interview as if it could be quoted. You just never know. We talked about getting a client's permission in advance. Not doing that is obviously a problem. And a lot of times too, if you're not working in tandem with co-counsel on PR, you might have, if there is co-counsel, they may have in-house folks or a PR team or a strategy that they're looking to do to say, okay, well, maybe we get this verdict that came down and we want to go out and forward and announce it or do something there. You don't want to be talking over each other or seem misaligned when you're supposed to be on the same team. So that's super important to keep in mind and think about too. And finally, the last one is probably the biggest one I see, and that's just failing to understand the fast pace of just news today. When there is something to announce, when there is some sort of breaking news, something you want to get out there, that window of time before people care and reporters care, before they move on to something else, that window of time is very short, as you probably know. And so that's why those continuous conversations that are happening all the time with lawyers, so you're kind of keeping up with what is going on in their world, is great. So that way, if there is a milestone or something coming up that you can prepare for, you can have your ducks in a row. So that way, when that time comes, you're not scrambling to figure out, okay, well, now we got to get this out. You're ready to roll, because again, the attention span of the news cycle and journalists is short. So I know I kind of blew through a lot and have you drinking from a fire hose today, but I appreciate you having me. Of course, any questions, whether here or later, happy to answer them. But we also have up on our website any more resources like blog posts, ebooks, podcast episodes is another place to get some more if you're interested in diving a little deeper. But that's all I got, Aaron. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. That was great.
Yeah.
I was just saying I need you to be like my media coach. I don't know in what industry, but will get me in front of a camera with your training.
There you go.
Thank you for that. James is our last speaker today. He is our client success specialist at Market My Market. Thank you for joining us, James. And we're going to have you dive into some digital marketing channel specialties. So go with it.
Thanks, Aaron, and thank you to some couple clients I see here and a couple prospects that I've been speaking to. Thank you for joining us, as well as thank you to everyone else joining us today. We value your time. So unlike Ryan, I have 3 slides instead of 2. And anyway, we're going to dive right into it, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. And for purposes of the time, let's get right to it. So marketing your law firm in 2022. And we're only 6 weeks away from 2022, and nowadays law firms are looking at what are we going to do before the holidays to figure out a game plan for 2022? So you definitely need to start looking now if you haven't started looking at all. And if you look at the form of text, images, sound, or video, essentially anything like the image above that I share here. However, what do you feel is best? If you look at all these medias, all these outlets, all these marketing sources, from television to radio to social media to internet, billboards, advertising, I'm sure at one point in time your law firm did part of this, all of this, or just some of this. So mainly in today's environment, the images and videos are some of the best marketing tools to increase your return on investment. And for marketing to be effective, you've got to use multiple channels as necessary. And we do this a number of different ways. Internally, I did this working in-house for 20 years before joining my market a year and a half ago. So billboards, as one of us brought up earlier in the webinar, definitely is still a source, but definitely expensive. And how many people are driving? I've been working from my home office for the last 4 to 5 years. So billboards are only effective if you actually see them and you drive by them. Social media obviously plays into a factor here. Radio and TV are definitely good mediums and forms, but obviously we're looking at nowadays, how are you going to be seen from an advertising and an internet perspective, which leads me into the next slide, Aaron. So there's many digital marketing channels, from Google My Business to local service ads. And getting back to Google My Business really fast, we're looking for your Google My Business. You could post there daily, weekly, monthly, however you want to do within your G&B listing yourself. You can also get reviews. You can also tell your audience that you are open 24/7. If you're a law firm, and this is a fast food industry, when people are looking at you nowadays online, I always emphasize, depending on your practice area, it makes sense to be open 24/7. It helps to have more reviews than your competition, and it also helps to have within your G&B listing the number of years you've been in business. And when people are looking for you and searching for you, they're going to look at you and your competitors. You got to stand out and make sure that you have one more review if you can, and be in business hopefully a little bit longer than they have, and obviously play all those other factors into it, from images to video postings to whatever might be within your G&B listing. Local service ads, we brought that up earlier. That's another form that you could be. Pay-per-click, AdWords, another form that you could be. You could literally be listed 4 times on the first page of Google, a couple from a paid standpoint, a couple elsewhere, from the map pack to the SEO. And then it also comes down to other social media, your website, and YouTube. A lot of people nowadays, from a social media standpoint, depending on what you have, obviously do a lot of Facebook marketing. We do that for clients ourselves, but unless you have a specific niche, where it be nursing home or whatever it might be. If I'm a PI attorney and I'm going after motor vehicle accidents, I don't necessarily want to market on Facebook and other social media platforms to try and get leads and clients. What I want to do that for is for branding and remarketing and retargeting, and whatever I blog about, I want to put that on my social media channel. Whatever content I have elsewhere on another platform, I want to make sure I have that across the board on multiple different platforms. And that comes back to your website, because your website is your inside salesperson. Do you have live chat on your website? When somebody comes to your website, are you capturing where they're coming from, like Chase talked about earlier, as far as the conversion, what Ryan talked about as well? Where are they going on your website? How is it being tracked? Are you following up with them? And then videos, as far as YouTube is concerned, a lot of days, when I first started in this industry 20 years ago, everybody said you have to have a professional video, and professional videos definitely do help. But nowadays, from a YouTube standpoint, you could just do your own video, get it out there, because something is better than nothing. Moving on to the next slide, Aaron. So that comes back to the intake process and tracking results. Obviously, before you launch your marketing campaign, you need to have a system in place so you can track it quarterly. Chase brought this up earlier in the webinar regarding CRM. Is it HubSpot? Is it Salesforce? Is it something else? So you really need to have a system in place. You need to be able to calculate your ROI in the end. How will you identify the source of the lead? And how will this lead be captured? And what is your follow-up process? And how many times will you follow up? I did a webinar about 1.5 years ago with Ryan. It was in the summer, maybe it was 16 months ago, with Ryan on intake and what are the top 10 to 12 questions in regards to intake and what those questions should be. So literally we could have a webinar about each one of these slides, and I literally could have about 30 slides. But I brought up intake process and tracking results because this is very important. You have to be able to figure out, okay, did this come in from my Google My Business listing? Did this come in from a form submission? Did this come in organically? Did this come in from my social media? So whatever that outlet is, we want to be able to capture that. And you should be able to capture that for your law firm, because you might be doing 10 things from a marketing standpoint. Maybe only 2 or 3 are actually working. So you got to figure out what those 2 or 3 are. And obviously what's working, you want to be able to dump more money into it. And then figure out why the other channels aren't working. Maybe it's the setup, maybe it's the process, maybe it's just the way things are laid out on your website, or you're not blogging enough, maybe you don't have enough content. So all of this plays into a factor as to how are you keeping track of this and what are you doing moving forward. that is all I have. As far as those particular slides, if we want to open it up to questions, Erin, I'll throw it back to you.
That's the next slide. We would love to hear your questions today. If you're able to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask Ben, or you can add them in the chat. Thank you, guys.
Well, I would be interested to know, Erin, how many people are actually doing many different marketing channels?
That would be interesting. Yeah, well, I have no questions, but thanks for a succinct and well done presentations. And then does anyone have any experience with Connect Text app from Amy Gabriel? Ryan, you are muted. It looks like you might have said something, but I didn't hear you.
I was definitely talking to myself, but
okay.
I will say, Amy, feel free to email us and tell us what you're reading or seeing about that. We can do a follow-up and the team can look into it.
Great.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard about texting apps is just being very careful with texting, doing the TCPA law. We've got some lawyers that specifically make their living off of suing companies for texting people who specifically do not opt in to be texted. So it's very important to have a specific button on your lead form that says I opt in to being texted.
Almost like the disclaimer that we have on websites that basically says, attorney-client privilege. You want to make sure that you have all this moving forward.
Great. While you guys think about other questions you may have, I wanted to shout out our next webinar. Again, looking forward to 2022. James, I think you freaked us all out when you said we're 6 weeks away from that, but that's the truth. So looking at Thursday, December 16th, we'll be going through some more business development and technology information. Okay, we have another question in the chat from Jose Oliveira. My question is, what about the expense of approving all of these videos by the bar of your state?
Jose, is the question about getting specific marketing assets approved by the bar associations?
Sounds like it. Yes.
I know that for like commercials, like running on TV, so some things that you basically put up and you can't take down. A lot of our clients have, made sure to get those approved by the bar. But depending on your state, some bar associations are more strict than others based off of the outbound marketing material you're putting out there. But I think it's going to be like state specific. But regardless of, I would make sure to get it. Like personally, if it was my law firm and I was putting out something where I couldn't retract it, I would make sure to get it approved by the bar.
And is there an expense tied to that? That was part of his question.
I don't believe in Florida there is.
Okay.
In my experience, no, typically not. But again, I can't speak for every state. I'm here in Florida, I work with clients across, but yeah, in my experience, that has been my case.
Yeah, and Jose's in Florida.
Great. I don't know why Cisco's picture disappeared. Well, that makes no sense to me, but these are our presenters today. Thank you guys all for being with us today. Their contact information is below, or you can feel free to reach out to us through our other materials. Yeah, I don't know where Cisco disappeared to. He ran off with his drink he had in his photo. Any other questions in the chat this afternoon before we wrap this up? We also have been recording this presentation, so we will share this with you so you have it as a resource. If you have anything specific you need to dive into, feel free to let us know. And we hope to see you in December.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. I'm going to wrap it up.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Bye.